Another Olympic bid for the 2026 Winter Games has gone cold with only 2 bids left in the running. A European city appears to set to host the Games by default. Citizens in Calgary in Canada took to the polls this week and voted against proceeding with their bid. That leaves only Stockholm and a joint Italian bid from Milan and Cortina d'Ampezzo in the running. But unresolved funding issues could leave those bids stuck at the starting block. Well, with more on this and a roundup of this week's biggest sports stories, Amro Elserty joins me now here in the studio. Hello to you, Amro. Does anyone actually want these games? The organisers must be concerned.
I think it's not like how it was before anymore. Before, people and nations used to take a lot of pride in bidding for big sporting events and trying to actually host them. But now people are having other priorities and more considerations to make. Like in Calgary, they actually believe that the financial aspects should be taken into consideration. That's why they voted against hosting the bid. Now it's all between the Stockholm bid and the Italian joint bid as well, but even that is not certain. The newly elected government in Sweden, they previously said that they do not want to be hosting these big events at the moment. It should be something for the future. So that's not actually all but done at the moment. It's not certain, and they're going to have another referendum for it next June. So we'll wait to see what's going to come up with that. And the Italian bid is actually supported by the government, but there are a lot of financial problems and aspects that are still related to it, and the budget is not confirmed at all.
Yeah, a lot up in the air there. Let's head over to tennis now then. And the ATP's busy tournament calendar is getting no love from top players, is it here? Senior voices this week have been concerned about burnout, haven't they? How serious is this issue?
Well, actually, I think it is quite serious because the ATP Tour tennis season is one of the longest in sports. They actually do participate in competitions for 11 months a year, which is actually longer than most of the professional sports that we know of. We've seen Djokovic and Alexander Zverev complaining about this, and they actually said that it's ridiculous, quoting Zverev actually, and Djokovic said it's unsustainable. And now the ATP announced that there will be another ATP competition for teams that will be held in the first week of January, which is already crunches up the messed up schedule for the ATP tennis. So I think it is serious. Federer was actually quite laid back when he was asked about this, but he can afford, because he says you can actually pull out of some competitions, but that players who are not up high in the rankings, they need to be playing every other month in a big tournament because they need to collect as many ranking points as possible. But he has the ability and the skill to actually play in fewer tournaments which he can win and maintain a higher ranking spot. So I think it is serious, and we'll wait to see, because more tournaments means more money. But on the other hand, the players don't have the physical or the mental ability to be competing in all of them.
Yeah, and finally, Amro, the Rugby World Cup is set to kick off in Japan next year, isn't it? And players there have been asked to cover up their tattoos amid cultural concerns. What more can you tell us about that? Has the ink dried on that decision, or can we expect more movement?
I think for now it seems as if it's settled, which is quite interesting and not common for me to see, to be honest. It was called for by the sports body itself. It was the World Rugby. They actually called on the players and the fans to cover up the tattoos in respect for the Japanese culture, which is fully understandable from both sides. But it's quite interesting because we haven't seen that when the Football World Cup went to Japan in 2002. Although football players tend to sport a lot of tattoos as well. And I think the interesting part is that we'll have to say how people will, and the fans and the players will stick to that. The New Zealand players were taking it quite positively, and they said, we completely understand the culture, we'll be covering up by wearing tights or whatever else in order to hide the tattoos. But it paves way for future hosting cities and countries that might come out and say this or that might be adopted by the players or the fans is not acceptable in our culture, and we call on people to hide it or not do it. And we have a Football World Cup, for example, that will be held in 2022 in Qatar, and it's not a drinking alcohol culture. So you might expect a lot of other countries in the future to seek the same thing by saying, please don't do what's not acceptable for our beliefs or culture. And I think that will be interesting to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Amro Elserty there. Thank you for joining us with Talking Sport.
Thank you very much.